Hey listeners, it's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. The Hidden Gem is a new show hosted by Maya Demishkovich, CMO at Carroll Community College. This podcast is dedicated to empowering community college presidents, leaders, and marketing and communication professionals with the knowledge and insights that you need to harness the full potential of strategic marketing and communications within your institution. New episodes drop every other Monday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search for The Hidden Gem wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell, Community Engagement Lead at Pathify. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a proud member of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow every day. Explore all of our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. We are here with a conversation that I know will be super helpful for me. I feel like I kind of observe from the sidelines a lot when it comes to sort of like workforce development, apprenticeships, and sort of all the intersections that kind of come into higher education in this current moment. So I'm really excited to kind of learn more. I feel like that's kind of been a little bit of the kind of the banner of 2024 so far with our episodes. It's just sort of like, please, like, teach me as much as you are teaching our audience, like kind of, I want to be the layperson here and I want to be curious and learn new things. I feel like this episode will be no different. But Rebecca, if you want to briefly introduce yourself and your professional background, kind of kick us off as we always do, and then we'll get more into the work that you're doing right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dustin. So I'm Rebecca, and I am the VP of Learning at Multiverse. I actually started my career in the K-12 space, though. I first as a high school special educator and then as a high school founder and principal. I loved that work and being so close to really great teaching and learning. And I also had this nagging question in running a college prep high school of what is college preparing my students for? And they would ask me questions like, what if I don't want to go to college? And I never felt like I had an answer where I could say, this other path will give you an opportunity that is rigorous and joyful and gives you a lot of optionality in your career and will serve you well, as well as I would like. And that really kept me up at night. And I started digging into other options for workforce development. And when I discovered apprenticeships, I had the aha moment of like, this is the hill I will die on in my career. This is what I wish my students had and combining so many things I think are really important at the start of one's career. And that's why I found myself at Multiverse.
I guess it's like a brief follow-up to that, because obviously it's, working in the K through 12 space was like a crucial part of your origin story. Is there anything else, like, practically maybe, of just sort of like, it's obviously its own unique world, but like you're saying, it collides and intersects with higher education in really important and kind of tangible ways and everything. Are there skills, are there things that you learned, lessons, like anecdotes or quotes or things that sort of kind of still swirl in your head from that experience? Because obviously it sort of informed your perspective of like why apprenticeships matter and everything like that. But like anything else, I guess, that still resonates for you from that experience.
Yeah, I remember having another aha moment. So I'll share a little bit of background about my school. My school is located in Camden, New Jersey, an especially distressed city outside of Philadelphia. We had a lot of very significant challenges. Our average ninth grader got to us at a second grade reading level. Camden at the time was the most violent city in America. So we had a lot of challenges around school safety and culture. We were trying to create a college prep environment in a city where very few people go to college. Some big challenges there in operating a school. And I remember I got a memo from the state, and forgive me because I don't remember the specifics, but it said something like, all of your students should have computer science training by 2024 or something like that. And I remember thinking, I know, I wish I could give them that. And I don't have good enough internet to give them that. And there's so many other things that I am juggling at this moment. And I remember thinking, I bet what's motivating this is that employers in the state really need people with better computer science skills and that there's an economic driver here. But schools are really alone in trying to navigate the changing technologies and skills and demands of the workplace and all of the other social challenges that really collide in a school building. And I remember thinking, the private sector should be helping out here. Where are they in all of this? And that really fueled my journey to finding how can we put more of the onus on the private sector to support in learning and reskilling efforts so that individuals but also businesses in the economy can achieve success for everyone. And that was sort of like the grounding question as I went on my journey to find other options outside of high schools. But that, where's the private sector in all of this question is still one that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Well, I guess like the joking is sort of like connecting the dots of like it's either like the biopic that will be told about it, or just like for me thinking about when like storytelling uses like flashbacks is like, well, that's like the collection of moments, the flashback to like that one, time when you're just sort of like, like the private sector should be, but then like life went on. And then eventually, that sort of manifested or whatever. Cause like, yeah, I mean, that's the idea I think is like, I came up through the very traditional higher education sort of pathway. So a lot of my references and experiences and everything is kind of grounded in that. But especially in this moment, there is sort of like so much kind of deliberate effort that has been happening, needs to happen, and continue to happen. Everything of just sort of weaving together, K through 12, higher ed, workforce, all these sort of things, and private sector, and how government is sort of influencing all these people to kind of come together and work together and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, there's going to be this sort of this collection of moments that sort of like, yeah, grounds, like you said, and sort of informs perspectives, or you sort of think back to and all that. With your current work at Multiverse. And in case folks aren't aware, can you explain a bit about the work that Multiverse does?
Yeah, so Multiverse operates applied learning programs in the UK and the US. In the UK, our programs align with the apprenticeship standards and the apprenticeship levy, which means that there is a lot of support and standardization of what we can offer for work-based learning in the UK. In the US, we offer a range of programs, apprenticeships, and shorter programs that really all surround this idea of applied learning. And I'm very excited to dive into that more today with my learning nerd hat on that I shared in terms of my background. But what we really believe is that this process of applying your learning and going through multiple iterations of practice and feedback is the best way to learn for individuals and also incredibly beneficial for businesses and for our economy. And that this is a choice, an option that we can give learners to further their careers, further their optionality as they explore different pathways and skills that they need for success.
Yeah, I mean, and just like kind of a broad point with this too, like I've said this in different conversations, just with this sort of like kind of proliferation of all these sort of alternative models of like how you sort of get someone from where they are to where they want to be career wise and everything. And to me, and I guess I keep sort of like echoing this point because I feel like it's for me sort of this like own sort of mental point of maturation of like there's room at the table for everybody. Like that's sort of my point of view. And like you said, it's like this is just like one of many options that like we can show, the impact and the success that we're having and everything. But if it's like if it's this or boot camps, whatever, and I think it's everybody's still kind of figuring out how best to have all these alternative models sort of like survive and thrive and everything. But I like that at least like there's just a lot of smart, committed people working to sort of you know find the way to keep these sort of different options sustainable because like clearly the monolithic 4-year bachelor's degree is the only way that somebody with a high school diploma, whether it's right after they finish high school or maybe decades afterwards, can like, propel their life and career forward. It's like there should be some other option, like in some that are longer, shorter, hands on or, whatever else. So, yeah, I mean, and honestly, like it's such a large issue and certainly on the global scale of like how do we upskill reskill people everything is like yeah we're going to need a lot of people working in a lot of different ways in different spaces and do it to kind of address that challenge.
We are so past the time where a single learning experience at the start of your career can sustain you for 40 plus years. Technology is changing daily, let alone, yearly or over the course of a career. And we need to have lots of different ways that people are learning or growing. And it won't work for individuals or for businesses if we don't. And I think also people thrive in so many different types of environments. And that's one of my favorite things about apprenticeships. Apprenticeships don't close the door on college, they don't have to exist in isolation. You can combine a whole pathway of learning opportunities over your career to pursue the things that you want and to achieve the life that you most want to have. And that's why I love being in this learning space because there's so much happening and there's room for all of us.
You mentioned applied learning, like that's sort of the concept in play, the thing that you were sort of implementing, utilizing, the way that you were supporting these learners. So again, just to sort of like kind of define it and really kind of capture the essence, the magic of applied learning. I guess just explain what that is and what you see as the main benefits of applied learning.
The way that we think of applied learning is starting with conceptual learning or theoretical knowledge in a classroom space, as do many learning experiences. But what's so important to us is that that's not the end of someone's learning. You can learn something in a classroom, you can learn something asynchronously, but then you need to apply it. You need to try it out. You need to combine your technical skills and your durable skills to see how it actually works in practice. Let's imagine you've learned how to make a pivot table, and you can do that in isolation, and that's really great. But what happens when the data changes or your manager changes up the project on you, or you have to explain how to use the table to a coworker that you don't get along with, or any number of the things that actually happen in real life. And that's what we want our apprentices and our learners to be able to do, to be able to learn something, put it into practice, get feedback, see what happens when the circumstances change, and keep developing their skills. And that's relevant in their specific role and in our learning program. But that's just a really important skill in one's career to be able to say, oh, okay, I need to learn this thing. The way I learned it isn't exactly how it happens in practice. Let me adjust. Let me be really dynamic in my technical skills. Again, complemented by what we call durable skills, those soft skills that allow you to translate your technical skills into impact on the job.
Yeah, and I think I like the phrasing, the durable skills, and I think just like I think that one is starting to kind of like win out. I think I've started to observe a little bit on like social media and elsewhere, and like I think that is like the best one. Like they are like I guess it sort of toughens them up after like soft skills or whatever But yeah, that idea of the monolithic 4-year bachelor's degree model is so and almost exclusively in that like theoretical place, like you're saying, and it's not as if like you're saying like that is worthless or not. It's the idea like how can you sort of like, I guess what I'm taking away is like find a perfect harmony, find that sort of symbiosis, like how does everything kind of feed off each other and all of that. And I think it's even that idea of like higher ed traditionally trying to address the absence of like applied learning opportunities and really try to encourage internships, but then it's just this like mad scramble and just sort of like every student trying to hustle and find their own things, and maybe they're unpaid, maybe they're paid, like, and there's just so much chaos inherent in the way that I think institutions have kind of approached trying to fit in something that I think they acknowledge is sort of a big gap and is valuable and is important and all those sort of things. So what you all are doing is sort of like so heavily focusing and uplifting and kind of emphasizing these sort of experiences and how important they are and everything. So I guess just to hear it from your point of view, uh, acknowledging and just sort of its inherent importance, but how do you see apprenticeships like being maybe like uniquely suited to address some of higher ed's current struggles? I think there's a myriad of things that they are sort of dealing with in terms of just sort of like relevance and all that. So I don't want to get ahead of myself or put words in your mouth or sort of steal your thunder here, but how do you see what you're doing as like uniquely suited for this moment?
Yeah, so first, from a learning perspective, I think about the gap in time between when you learn something and when you apply something. So even an example that you shared about internships, you could learn something at the start of a year, maybe go through one or two entire years in a classroom setting before you apply it in an internship. And then the chances that you remember the specifics, that that specific teacher is there and ready to answer your questions, that's really diminished. Versus in an apprenticeship, your instructor, your coach is right there with you. So you can learn something on Monday, put it into practice on Tuesday, realize you didn't actually understand it as well as you thought, go back to your instructor, ask for some feedback, meet with your peers, iterate, get feedback from your manager. And it can be a really ongoing dynamic process that helps you to accelerate your learning and the impact that you can have from your learning. So I think there's this huge learning benefit to learning and working at the same time. Then apprenticeships offer a solution around affordability. Not only are our programs free to the learner, but our learners are paid on the job because they are working full time. And that just absolutely opens up accessibility for apprenticeships. And we get that feedback from our apprentices all the time. They say, I just assumed certain career paths were out of reach. I just assumed because I can't pay for the programs I see available and I can't take time away from work that I just could never become a software engineer or a data analyst. And apprenticeships allow you to do both at the same time. And to the first point, in a way that's really efficient and from a learning perspective and beneficial. And then I think finally, the very unique structure in which the employer pays for the apprenticeship actually keeps the provider really honest in terms of curriculum and relevance. So, higher ed, as noted, has a really far distance between learning and application. But we are held immediately accountable to whether or not our employer partners feel that our curriculum solves immediate pain and immediate needs on the job. So in the sales process and in our ongoing relationships, they're constantly giving us feedback. We want to learn this technology. That example isn't actually what happens in the workplace. They're helping us make sure that our curriculum is modern and that it actually sets up our learners for success. And when we put all of those things together, the learning efficacy, the affordability, the relevance of the curriculum, we think that apprenticeships are a really powerful tool, either at the beginning of your career, but also in the middle of your career to upscale or even to rescale into a new industry.
Hey, it's Dustin here. Exciting news. I'll be at the Engage Summit in Raleigh, North Carolina on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Hosted by Element 451, the Engage Summit is your roadmap for AI readiness in higher education. Sessions will focus on cutting-edge AI applications that are reshaping student outreach, enhancing staff productivity, and offering deep insights into ROI. This isn't your typical conference. It's a strategic summit where you'll learn from the best about leveraging AI and digital strategies in higher ed marketing. Imagine 2 days filled with hands-on sessions, real success stories, and the chance to network with top minds in the field. You'll leave with practical, transformative takeaways as you learn how AI fosters a more personalized, efficient approach from recruitment to student success. Oh, and the best part? The Engage Summit is incredibly affordable. Use the discount code Enrollify50 and you can register for just $99. So join me and many of my fellow Enrollify Network creators at the Engage Summit this June. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. Can't wait to see you there. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, you said that. I'm like, that does like make a lot of sense. That idea that like it could be fit in, sort of like leading to my next question, like it could be fit into anyone's sort of life journey, and that idea of like, well, I'm not sure what I want to do yet. This would be a really good way to try it out and minimize a fair deal of risk, where higher education is like, you're paying a pretty penny to kind of like do that exploration. And that's the path I took. I had a great time. It was a very transformational experience for me, but like, we're dealing with a lot of student loan debt in this country. Not like there's a lot of other sort of like, risks or sort of collateral damage, I guess, for lack of a better term, going with that path or thinking that that's the only path. And then certainly, that idea of like career switchers or something like that, where it's like, I got laid off, or, I've always wanted to do that. It looks really interesting. Or, there's just a lot of, kind of optionality and sort of providing these different on-ramps and different things for, like wherever someone's at and wherever they're looking to go. And I think the phrasing that I've been hearing, just again, sort of this like this kind of outsider looking in of like workforce development, whatever else, where it's the idea of like working to learn to work. Like you can kind of like keep kind of bouncing around where it's like, okay, I do this, go through one of your programs that kind of sets me up. And it's like, well, I've always wanted to, been a life goal to get the credential of a 4-year degree, but it's like, hey, well, now I have a pretty gainfully employing job that actually pays for, getting whatever credential I want. And maybe that is a bachelor's or a certificate or whatever else. But that idea that, like you said, it's like, it doesn't just like close the door, to going to college or something. Like, it can be just sort of like fitting in. So I guess this is sort of where I've been leading towards, and I guess just to give this more sort of space here and to hear it from your point of view, is like the response you're seeing from higher ed and how sort of what you do kind of complements what these institutions are doing and everything. So how do you see sort of like that kind of harmony, and maybe if there is or isn't, like if it feels like very like, well, you got to do one or the other, but you can kind of go back and forth, like just sort of what your point of view is and how sort of what you do kind of works with higher education.
Not only I think is there room for everyone at the table, but we need everyone at the table. There's too many needs for different types of learning to exclude any providers, and that's really why we are partnering with higher ed institutions to match our programs with college credit. So we just announced this week a partnership with Northeastern, where graduates of our applied analytics program can get 12 college credits toward a bachelor's of science in analytics at Northeastern, because we know that some of our program completers are going to want to pursue a degree. Maybe they do our apprenticeship and they say, this is exactly the role that I want, and my dream job requires this kind of degree or this kind of additional training. But they've been able to access that and to learn that about themselves, as you noted, in a risk-free way, because they've been earning while they have been learning. So they didn't take time away from the workforce. They didn't go into debt. They explored something and they were working at the same time. And even if a learner decides to pivot away from the area that their apprenticeship is in, they still have gained really valuable experience. And now they've gained that experience and also college credits as well. And we hope to have other partnerships here in the US so that we can keep connecting sort of traditional value through credentials and through college credits to what we see as having a great deal of business value and real life application through our apprenticeships.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess well-timed conversation for that amazing kind of announcement and everything. And yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that I'd love to see. And it feels like it adds sort of like such a vote of confidence in the model, which is great. And I think can like reassure people who are maybe sort of like on the fence, in the sense of like, hey, like we're working with this institutional partner to kind of like really start to kind of pave this path, versus being like, well, you could have done it. People maybe did. But like, it was sort of, not structured or, anything like that. And I think that's just what's kind of ringing in my head, is like so much of this anecdotally probably was happening, that idea where it's like, hey, you can work full time and go get your MBA or whatever. A lot of people have done that, but then it's like any of these sort of things where it's like, okay, that you are working in a company and learning that, like, it's just trying to put that even like light sense of structure around things, like it's like to make sure that learning is sort of codified in our brains, and we're kind of reflecting and processing and sort of like, doing all this, versus it being sort of having the whole onus on the individual to try to figure out the path and navigate the path and understand like what they're learning and how to apply it, all, all these sort of things. So it's like, just I even see this in sort of like, networking opportunities, where it's like you just put that right amount of structure in the right places to make sure like the right people are talking to each other about the right things, and all of that. It's like you can have some really uh kind of awesome outcomes from that, of like, oh great, okay, these people, that should have been connected were, and they're talking about the right things, whatever. um so yeah, I mean, I definitely, I guess like I would have been surprised if like you were saying like, I don't know, there's no connection whatsoever, or like we're actually antagonistic against each other. It's like, feels like that shouldn't be the case. I feel like there should be some harmony, and it's good to see like a very explicit example of that has, kind of blossomed here. Because we've seen that a bit in with like boot camps and different things. Like, I think if they've kind of figured out their place in kind of the ecosystem, that they've had that model of like, okay, do the boot camp, finish the program, and you could, pursue a credential from an institution. So um something else though, I think, you have sort of a expansive reach across the globe, as I understand it. So uh do you see the work playing out differently outside the US? And I think this is absolutely where I am incredibly naive, or, don't understand, a lot of the sort of global higher education space. So as much as you're aware of it, do you see a lot of this playing out the same way or differently at other areas around the world?
Yeah, a lot of cultures and countries are very supportive of apprenticeships, and not just in the trades where apprenticeships are common in the US, but in the areas where Multiverse operates, such as in technology. And that is why we founded and why we originated in the UK, where there is so much public and financial support for apprenticeships. And that in and of itself provides something that I think is really important for young people when they are thinking about careers, and that is predictability. When a young person can say, okay, I know that there are apprenticeships in these industries offered at these companies, and I know, college is this much money and it's offered here, and here are the outcomes that I can get, then they can make the right choice for themselves. But unfortunately, we actually have a lot of unpredictability around apprenticeships in the US, which means that it can be very challenging for young people to say, "Oh, wait, I bet that state-based grant is going to still be available in 4 years when I graduate high school, so I'll bank on that." And so there are a lot of really incredible models throughout Europe where work-based learning is much more common, and I think that serves as a fantastic example of what we can follow in the U.S. and in other parts of the world as well. But what I think is so special about apprenticeships is because they are work-based and employer-based, they can really fit so many different types of industries and cultures and countries, because you need this baseline of instruction, you need this connection between learning and working, but that can happen in so many different dimensions. I think even of my own experience in becoming a teacher, I think all teachers are apprentices, because you learn a lot of theory about uh, learning and teaching, and then you're suddenly in front of 30 young people, and they have a lot of thoughts about how you teach and what you're teaching, and you just get a ton of feedback, and you have to grow and get better. And that's the commonality in learning, which I think we can apply in so many different types of settings.
Well, and you answered the follow-up question I had. It's just like a curiosity. I'm like, it's like, is there any kind of job or industry like where this just wouldn't fit? Because like it was almost like a leading question where I'm like, no, right? Like it could flex and kind of adapt. Like that's my brain almost wanted confirmation where it's like, yeah, it does feel like that's a beauty of really evolving our thinking, like you said, of just like, oh, well, apprenticeships are just sort of like, you're trying to be an electrician or are you doing whatever else? It's like, no, we kind of are taking the best of both worlds of like, that really, just long running historical evidence of like the value of, that hands-on learning with like, you know, the embrace, like I was saying, of like internships and everything, where it's like, hey, well, you think those are important, right? Like, how do you, formally integrate them into your curriculum and all? It's like, well, students just find them. I don't know. They figure out how to do like, just think, well, there's got to be a better way. So yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And I guess like this is like for me to get geeky and maybe for both of us to geek out together here. Like in terms of like the learning experiences of how you're sort of, augmenting or supplementing or sort of, supporting, obviously this person's working, that company's got all like their systems and doing whatever else. Like, how do you sort of like on your side support the learners in their journey? Like, is it, I guess, from your point of view, sort of like akin to sort of the experience that they would be getting at a campus, or are you kind of carving out your own sort of path of like what their sort of like their hub of how they, engage in those learning experiences or whatever else? Like, what's that like?
And first, to your question about other industries where apprenticeships are applicable, there's so many industries that just don't call them apprenticeships. So if you think about how we train medical professionals, how even consultants learn their trade, student teaching, just even becoming a manager. There's so many informal and formal ways that we teach people through work. We just don't use this term apprenticeship that much in the US. So I think they're actually very common, and especially in areas of business and the economy that are seen as being very exclusive and elite, are actually still learning by doing. And so I think there's room for all of us to learn by doing. And I think that's a really exciting thing for apprenticeships, that they can have so many different types of application. In terms of supporting learners, the first thing that we do is provide instruction in a lot of different modes so that it can be accessible in a lot of different ways. Our apprentices get asynchronous instruction, synchronous teaching, they have a coach, they do peer based learning, they get feedback from their manager. there are tutoring sessions, there's a self-serve library of content. There's so many ways that they can access their learning. And that's a really important principle for us because we want to be accessible to people who learn in lots of different ways and are on lots of different schedules, who maybe have a deadline coming up and they need to accelerate their knowledge of something, or they're finding a topic more difficult and they want to slow down and get more resources. So we provide a lot of optionality in our programs. The coaching is really key for supporting our learners. It's so important that someone can learn something, understand the context where they're going to need to apply it, and then ask questions, either of their peers or of their coach, because there are so many different ways you can apply something. And we do a lot of personalization in our curriculum, but there's still going to be that nuance of, well, my manager wants this project in this very specific way, and I need some guidance in delivering that. We also support, especially our early talent apprentices, in learning how to manage up. So one of the examples we always give them is, at the beginning, your manager is going to say, ask me any question you have. Don't ask them any question you have. This is how you think about what kinds of questions to raise and how to get support. And this is how to find mentors in your workplace and how to run your work by someone else. So we can really support our apprentices in supporting themselves and in finding the resources either through our program or in their workplace. And then finally, we have a lot of self-serve resources because, again, we're wanting to teach our apprentices how to learn over the course of their careers. And so while it's great that they have an instructor and a coach now, we say, in a few years, you might realize that there's a technology that you really want to learn that will help you further your career. This is how you can go through that process of supporting yourself and identifying it as what you need to learn, teaching yourself that, iterating, as we do in our program, so that they can keep pursuing advancement on their own as well.
I guess what I'm hearing, or sort of the impression that I get, is trying to find that balance between like on demand, self paced, like if somebody needs to move quicker, or if they, just need to kind of go about it on their own time, they can do that. But then there's so much based in sort of just personal reflection and interactions and processing, and that folks are sort of best positioned to provide different supports or something, where it's like, oh well, we're both peers but we work at different companies, and we could maybe like help each other get some different perspectives. And then like a coach can maybe be more like holistic, where it's just like, how are you managing everything, like how are you feeling and all that, and just try to help move them along in that process. But then just obviously that idea of like being at work and working with intentionality with your manager, like to make sure you're kind of synthesizing learning experiences, or bringing like, hey, well, I was talking with my coach or my peer or whatever about this, that, the other thing, and they could be like, well, it's actually a very like interesting perspective about like the work that we do, how we do it, why we do it, the way that we do it. Because yeah, again, it's just like certain things could happen by happenstance, or depending on a certain person's like personality, like how comfortable they are talking about this stuff, or just their background. And certainly, like you said, just like early talent, obviously are just going to have much less exposure and experience like doing these sort of things. So, you know, uh, making sure that, yeah, they, ask questions and do things like that, like in the right way, in the right time and all that, because it's like, they are earnestly trying to learn and grow, but it's like, yeah, you might just unintentionally kind of step at it if you're sort of, asking questions at inappropriate times, or, not using your resources to kind of find your answers, or anything like that. But so yeah, I mean, this is really incredible work. I think just the idea of really kind of grounding things, like you said, like even the word is sort of novel in the US, of like apprenticeships, like they are integrated in a lot of like big important fields, like teaching and medicine and all these sort of things, and have a long, very long trail in the trades and everything. Like, how can we kind of put a fresh coat of paint on the sort of applied learning philosophy, make sure that we're sort of espousing sort of the really positive impact of teaching people in this way and everything. So it's really fascinating stuff, and I think we'll wrap up as we always do. If you have a final thought, a call to action, something you want to point people towards to maybe keep the conversation going as we wrap up the episode here.
Something I've been thinking about a lot recently is how we use backwards design in planning education programs. I use that as a teacher. That was how I plan my school. That's how we plan our products at Multiverse. We think about, what's the end that we want and how can we set up the learner for success throughout the program. And what I think is so interesting is that in the broader education industry, we haven't backwards planned very well. we have careers that are dynamic and shifting in nature. And we have these very static learning experiences at the start of them. And there's a real opportunity for us to think about what it means to be successful in your career, in the multiverse world, in tech, in a tech career over the course of one's lifetime. And then what are the core skills that you need to learn and then relearn throughout that time? And that's why we think that both technical and durable skills are so important, because your durable skills are persistent. They help you to keep gaining knowledge, to keep questioning things, to keep seeking new opportunities. And we need to provide those opportunities for our learners so that they can pivot, they can learn about what is new in their industry or switch industries and achieve the lives that they want, and also contribute to the businesses in their communities in the way that we need. And so that's something that's been really top of mind about how do we help everyone backwards plan, not just from a short-term experience, but a little bit more longer term from there.
Yeah, and I guess even like empowering autonomy, in people's careers and flexibility and all that. So, just a couple like flashy, words there as we wind things down. But, we'll certainly have ways to connect with you and Multiverse in the description for the episode. And just thanks so much for the work that you and your team do and for taking some time to talk all about it here on the podcast. And I just really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dustin.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.